Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Huddle. I'm flying Lone Ranger today, so appreciate any input you guys can have. I'm without my co-part. Mike is out with his family on spring break. But we got a lot to talk about. My desk is filled with things I want to share today. Um, why don't we start off with, I took an interesting call this morning from an agent about a cash transaction where we were debating on the role of the agent to verify the buyer and the entity. The buyer has asked that the property go into a trust and the offer be written um, with the trust name, and then the executor of the trust would sign on behalf of the trust, which all sounds fine. But it brought into question the validity of this buyer. So, do you know the buyer's real? So this is what have we done enough as an agent to verify if the buyer is real? The person we've shown the house to is not the person who's going to sign the offer. And the person, we've never met them. We've never spoken to them. We've had directions from the person we showed the house to, which will ultimately fund the purchase to have it written in a trust and by someone we don't know. So this brought me back to real estate school. So let's see how much you retained. What do we call the person who is signing the deed to transfer property? You want to remember? You're like, the deeder. It's not the deeder. What? Nobody knows? Come on. Who signs the deed? Good. It's the grantor. Good. That is the right answer. Nice job. It is the grantor. So in this case, we were debating if the buyer is real, like, is this a legit person? And you might be thinking, well, isn't this pretty isn't it going to be obvious? We're going to get a copy of a trust. Um, what do you call the person who's receiving the deed? So the buyer. If the one selling the property is the grantor, then the one receiving it's the grantee, right? So now here's the next question. What process do we take to verify the grantee? Does the grantee have to sign the deed? Okay. So does the grantee sign the deed? Yes or no? So we know the grantor's got to sign it, right? The grantor's got to sign it to transfer the title to the buyer, to the new owner, transfer ownership. Does the new owner, the grantee, sign the deed? Is Rena right? What do you think? You're like, Will, I want to sell some houses. I want to go back to Stringham. If I would have known we were doing a real estate quiz. The answer is the grantee does not have to sign. And the reason why we were debating this is because the title company were like, what's their process in verifying that this person's real? Aren't they going to, pull verification? Aren't they going to get a driver's license for this person? I thought it was very interesting debate, and we have to remind ourselves that grantees do not have to sign deeds. So what is required for a deed to be valid? You're like, are you kidding me right now, Will? Okay, well, it's got to be signed by the grantor. It has to have the property address. And it doesn't have to be signed by the grantee, but there is something that has to be done. Do you remember? Yeah, Rachel, not notarized, but it actually has to be delivered. So remember, delivery is required. And Rena, you said recorded. When it's recorded, it's delivered. And that's called constructive delivery. So it does have to be delivered. So just notice that this buyer it doesn't necessarily have to produce any form of identification. Now, I'm saying has to. Should we? Yeah, we should. Do we have a valid contract if we don't know this person is legit? And I think there's a reasonable effort here on our agent's part to verify the person signing the contract is indeed a real person with a real entity, because we don't want our sellers entering contracts where they they don't have any party to go after if needed. Okay. Okay. Well, I hope that stimulated you a little bit. Let's go on to, for those who can see your screen, the division newsletter was produced yesterday, just came out. So I'm going to show you, I thought was an interesting stipulation. I'm going to not trying to make names here the thing, just the lesson. But this particular agent and Draper, principal broker, obtained permission to show a client a listed property from another agent. During the showing, without the knowledge and consent of the seller, the agent recorded himself walking through the home, commenting on features that he did not like. The agent posted the video to social media account without the consent of the owner or the listing agent, but later removed it. When asked about it by the division, first, the agent, Mr. Grant, denied the existence of the video. In a subsequent interview with the division, Mr. Grant admitted the existence of the video and that he had posted on social media. Then he admitted that his conduct violated law and agreed to a penalty of $5,000 and 6 hours of continuing education. I see a lot of this on social media where we're commenting about houses or showings of property. You cannot do that without the consent of the property owner or the listing company. And the listing company, if we were asked, would get consent from the owner to do so. So be careful when you're making your social media reels. Make sure that you have permission to record the property. Like that one. I think there was another one. How many of you guys have already read the newsletter? Yes? No? Okay, here's another one. Let me just put it back up. This is similar. Share screen. Here we go. Share. Okay. This one, Agent and Sandy, this stipulation, February 21st. Mr. Willie acknowledges that he hired a videographer to create a video clips of him showing homes to buyers. He then contacted the seller's agent to schedule a showing of a listed property. On the day of the showing, Mr. Willie allowed 2 videographers to enter the property with the intention, to create personal real estate advertisement without the permission of the owner. He admits that he left the videographers unattended inside the home for several minutes, and he left to change his clothes. He returned several minutes and the video as the video was being completed. The homeowner returned while the videographers were in the home. Of course they did. Like, who are you guys? When confronted by the homeowner, Miss Willie told the owner that he was filming the home for his client's husband, who had not been present for the showing. However, this was not a standard showing. Mr. Willie did not have an agency agreement with the person to whom he had showed the home. And a few days later, he apologized to the owner and acknowledged that he had not obtained permission to film the home prior to doing so. And his actions resulted in another $5,000 fine and 3 hours of education. So I hope when we're getting creative about our social media posts that we remember to obtain permission. I thought those were interesting. So okay. Comments on that at all? All right, we're already smarter about deeds, and now we're smarter about our social media. Okay, want to move on to buyer compensation, the hot topic. Love to have any comments from you guys since I'm missing my co-pilot. I said there are 3 things in the email. If you're going to take notes, I think this is very important to understand right now. The things that we do know. I don't see changing the advice that we would give a seller to offer a 3% BAC. I don't see that changing. I don't see that changing today. I don't see that changing in July. I don't see that changing next year. I don't see that changing in 10 years from now. The reason why we want to offer a 3% BAC is to hire all the buyers, exposed to all the buyers, and to remove any obstacles that might be formed inside a buyer-broker agreement. There's some details here that have not been worked out, and I don't want to be a broken record. We've talked about this, I think, ad nauseum on many of these huddles. But if you want to bring up anything about stipulations of NAR, happy to do so. Talk about that if you would like. Our action items right now is to focus on the structure of the buyer guide. Jamie announced yesterday in sales meetings that the buyer guide went through a few more little tweaks, but fundamentally it looks exactly the same. So nothing really big. Although at the very end of the buyer guide, we added more checklists. And these are now on the internet with the buyer guide link, and it's a flip book. So we did expand the checklist. I see this happening more and more, the more we're thinking about additional documents that we may want to include. So keep checking on that and make sure that you're really comfortable with the structure of the buyer guide. So that's number 1. Number 2 is listing agents right now should be presenting buyer services and selling the buyer services to a seller. Now, we've always done that, but we need to continue to do that. We need to explain to sellers what the role is of a buyer's agent, the duties they have and the responsibilities they have, the time it takes, really the scope of the entire job. We need to explain that better in our listing presentations. Yes, Trisha, they'll print them. They're ready to go. You just right now we're kind of doing one-off, so you want to print 1 or 2, that's fine. We're looking at mass producing these later once we have more clarity on what the NAR stipulations are going to look like. We did, just so you guys just remember, we did hold off on a mass, kind of putting on the internet and all that until we got the NAR stipulation. And the paragraph stating the buyer agent commission has been edited to fit the NAR stipulations. Okay, so let's see, where is that? Shoot, what did I just do with it? I just had it. It's somewhere on my screens here. I've got 2 screens open. I can hear Joe in my head right now, you guys. Will, close all your open screens.
Will, close all your open apps.
I know. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can't find him. Shoot, I just had it open too. Now, bummer. Hey Joe, do you want to pull up the buyer guide off the internet?
You got it.
If you don't mind, okay. Shoot, yeah, I thought I already had it, but I don't. Hey, while he's doing that, I'm going to take a look at an article. This is from Fortune Magazine. Steve sent it out. If you haven't looked at it yet, I'll save. We can do it now in Huddle. Let me go ahead and share screen. I'll show it to you. This is from Fortune Magazine. It's taking some statistics that NAR offered about, let's see, this will stop other screen sharing. Do you want to continue?
I'm sharing the buyer guide, so you can kick me off if you want.
Oh, okay. Well, here, let's show the buyer guide first, and we'll come back to the article.
All right, so everybody, it's on the internet here on the vertical left here. You want to go down to Docs and Visuals right here under Digital Flipbook Links. And you open this up. And in the buyer guide resources and checklists, here's every breakdown of all those things that are there. And
Nice.
which one do you want to open? You want to open one of the actual buyer's guides?
Yeah, go to the buyer guide and open it up, and we'll just go to the last page. to show where that is now edited.
We'll go to get to the actual buyer guide.
Flip books, good.
Flip books. Here's Wasatch back, Wasatch front, Southern Utah, more to come. We'll just open Wasatch front because it's in the middle. That's the only reason we're opening Wasatch front.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, you can just skip through. I'll tell you when to stop. I think it's page 29, I think. Yep, page 29.
Well, there's 30.
Yeah, go back one step. Yeah, so when we're explaining the buyer broker agreement, your solution for representation and protection and confidence. That's the purpose and reason why we have the agreement. That unlocks all the benefits of a fiduciary relationship with a client instead of going them from customer to client. Customers do not have these protections, clients do. In that paragraph that says, how is your agent compensated? That paragraph in that language has been edited to fit this NAR stipulation. So you're good to go in the world we're in now and the world we will be in after July. Okay, so we had to just change the MLS compensation piece and we're ready to go there. Okay, thanks, Joe. All right, we'll stop sharing that. And then I'm just going to open up this article, I hope. Yeah, okay, it's on my screen, ready to go. Share, here we go. This is Fortune magazine. Okay. The article is 90% of home buyers have historically opted to work with a real estate agent or broker. Here's why that's unlikely to change. And then it's according to the National Association of Realtors, which I gotta go, okay, all right. But nevertheless, the data is legit. These are real surveys that NAR spends money on every year. I don't know if you guys have ever been back to Chicago. I have. I've been in the NAR headquarters. This was about 10 years ago. I was there and found out some really interesting things I did not understand as a realtor for many, many years and took for granted. But every year they fund about $1 million for a survey. Where they poll 10,000 different homeowners across the entire country in different price points, ranges. And the survey is very legit. And it's published every year in what's called the Home Buyers and Sellers Survey that NAR puts out. It's free to members. You can go on their website and pull the data. It's extensive. I mean, there's 300 pages to these surveys. So what they're offering here is a perspective that, let's see, I'll read here. Yeah, it's important to note the National Association of Realtors not set commissions, which we've heard many times. The cooperation compensation rule that has been subject to litigation says that the selling broker have specifically in each listing an offer of compensation by our brokers. This offer could be any amount, even zero. Customers continue to have options when it comes to compensating their broker they work with. Some consumers may opt to pay a fixed fee for their broker services. In other cases, sellers may offer concessions on sales prices, which could be used by the buyer to help compensate their broker. And in any other cases, listing agents may also offer a portion of their own compensation to buyer's agent, as long as it's not offered across the MLS. The bottom line is, this is the conclusion, is that consumers will continue to have the ability to choose what kind of professional real estate advice they like and how much and how they want to pay for the work of a real estate professional. Historically, 90% of home buyers have opted to work with real estate agents and brokers. That figure is likely to not change. Okay, so it's unlikely to change. Even in the era where seemingly everything can be researched, purchased electronically, the clear value added by realtors remains evident. 9 in 10 home buyers would use their agent again or recommend their agent to others. Agents and brokers in local markets and neighborhoods have provided access to extensive information about available homes, and we protect buyers, determine realistic budgets, research various financial options, including programs that would help buyers with their down payment. Seasoned agents, it goes on to say more about what we do in evaluating property and help protect the interest of a buyer. That really concludes the article. It's really good point of view and a good reminder. So consider yourself up to date on the latest from Fortune magazine and a commentary on housing. So I hope that gives you some talking points, maybe also some comfort in knowing what we're predicting the future to be. I mean, there is a guys, I send myself here. Let me just hold on one sec. Let me just pull up something I want you to hear about. Hold on a sec. Okay, here it is. I'm going to play a reel. I guess I could send it to myself. Hey, Joe, if I send this to you, can you play it?
Bet I can figure it out.
Okay. Joe Lowry, here we go. Send it, Joe. Paste, send. Okay. Okay, just sent it. I think I mentioned this in a couple of huddles a while ago, but this is an interview with Jeff Bezos. While you're doing that, Joe, I'll see if I can attend to the chat here. Let's say I have a first-time homebuyer showing today where the listing agent has let me know that the seller is only offering a 1.5 BAC. She also stated that the home is priced at appraisal price. My buyers are very tight on their funds. I have been trying to figure out how I'm going to get my commission up without raising the purchase price or asking the buyers to find more money. Any suggestions? Great, great, great question. And thank you for that. Who is that? BJG Can. Who is that?
I think it's Becky Glover.
Hey, it's me.
Oh, okay. All right, Becky Glover. All right, let's see if we can help her out here. How are we going to start this? What do you think we should do? So it's 1.5. Do we have a buyer broker agreement already, Becky?
No buyer broker with these guys yet.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're not the listing agent.
Nope, not the listing agent. And as a matter of fact, this home has not hit the MLS yet. So all conversations have been with the listing agent. We can still see BAC on our MLS until June, July.
Right.
But this has not hit the market. So this really is my first one where I think this is how it's going to play out as we get to June and July.
Yep. Can happen. So if you guys don't know Becky, she's one of our top agents in our company, by the way, not just in Kanab, but she is in Kanab. I think you were Chairman Diamond, weren't you? Anyway, a phenomenal.
I don't know, but I showed.
Yeah, yeah, she our words banquet, but she a phenomenal producer. You guys, a real pro. So Peter Felix says, take care of your client. It's good advice. We should always take care of our client. So are we suggesting that we move forward with the 1.5? Scott says the appraisal only benefits the person who paid for it. Okay.
True. But we're in Southern Utah limited on appraisers. And I'm 99% sure in the appraisal lottery, we'll draw this same appraiser for our lender too.
Okay. All right. So Peter is saying if the buyer can't pay you, you're still going to take whatever the seller offers. Is everybody okay with that? Help Becky out. What do you think?
Can you move them to 2%?
All right. So Tracy Wheeler is suggesting maybe we ought to ask to come up maybe to 2%. So, and so what mechanism do we use when we ask for additional compensation inside of an offer?
Yeah, I definitely will use the addendum to do that. But in my mind, I believe where this home hasn't hit the market yet, this seller is not going to come up in their commission for BAC to make the deal. I think that they'll go live with it, and it may then push my buyer out of the situation. And so trying to get the deal for my buyer before it hits the market. I don't want to compensate for the 1.5, but I don't want to also lose the deal for my client.
So Tara's asking if they're offering a fair price for the home.
Yeah, it's a fair price.
Becky, how about the selling agent? Are they willing to give up some of their commission to you?
So I will tell you, this selling agent is a chronic take less commission, put less commission out there. So in my mind, I'll bet she's doing this for a 2% commission already. And I will bet you she won't cough up another 0.5%. But again, I'll come in and ask for it when I do write the offer. It's just knowing that the appraisal, because normally what I would do is come in and raise my price to cover my other percent of commission, and then have them kick that back to commission for me. But in this case, knowing that they are at appraisal price, I don't know if I want to go that route. So of course, I'm going to come in and try to ask. I just don't want to upset my buyers. If these guys say, no way, we're not going to do more commission, and I lose the deal for them, right? I'm walking on a little bit of sticky ground where this has not been listed. Or if this was a multiple offer situation, I'd be in a similar situation.
Okay. Becky, we could have done the whole class on just this one question. While you guys are all contemplating this, can I change the scenario to look at it from a seller's point of view? Let's go back to 2013, 2012. Economic conditions in 2012 where we had short sales everywhere. Properties were depreciating. And matter of fact, the market did not turn in most of Utah until December 2012. So we were on a decline from 2007 to 2012. Yep, 5-year decline. So would we list a house for a seller that if our commission made them upside down, would we list the house? Did we list houses where the seller was then made upside down, meaning they had to bring money to closing to pay our services? Did we list houses that our commission caused them to have no equity? Yes or no? Did we or not? Well, we did. How many sellers had to get short sale approval? Why did we have to get short sale approval? Because they had no equity. They had to get a short payoff approved because there was no equity. So every short sale, our commission was added to the expenses and took more of equity from the property. So if there were 10 listings and 40 of them, or 40% were short sale, that means almost half of our sellers were finding ways to pay us, and we had to get the bank to approve the sale because they were going to take a short payoff on their loan in order to pay us a commission. Some sellers just brought money to closing to get rid of the payment and to have the debt come off of their books. Ramon, you said once I did. So, our commission is an expense to the equity of the property. So what's different for us right now is that we have decades. There is no one on this call who has ever been in the world we're coming up to, where Becky's scenario is it feels like we can either get the buyer the house or we get paid our fee. And that's what's happening, right? We're debating this. And I've said, I started saying this about 6 months ago. We have to shift our mentality. Because how low is it going to go? Now, we could just go, oh, I think we should just do what's best for the customer. Now, hidden inside of that phrase is we should do whatever best for the customer and take whatever you pay, whatever someone else thinks you're worth. That's what's hidden inside of that phrase. We should do what's right for our customer and get paid whatever someone else thinks we're worth. That's what's hidden in that phrase. You guys agree with me? Because how low does this go? I mean, Becky, what if they only offered half a point? Do we say anything then? I mean, do we grin and bear it at 1.5? Do we grin and bear it at 2? Do we grin and bear it at half? What do we do if it's 0? So Peter is you take care of the client. So does that mean that we get paid nothing? So could we really buyer, broker, client, take on the liability, contract with them, hold their earnest money, do the job, and take care of the client and not be paid? I'm just asking. I mean, and do you see what's happening? Look at the turmoil. But I want to take care of my client. How did they become a client? When they signed a buyer broker agreement. They're not a client until they sign the buyer broker agreement. Right? And the buyer broker agreement is the only way that they become a client. And inside the buyer broker agreement describes how you're going to be paid and what you're going to do for that job. Very similar and in parallel to the listing agreement. And it seems like we were okay with sellers adding to their problem of lack of equity in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. When prices were depreciating, we were okay with that. Look, nobody wanted to cause a problem, but if you extricate the agent from the transaction, there is no transaction. And if you extricate Becky, who's one of the best agents in the state, and her expertise from this transaction, there is no transaction. It doesn't happen. And if it happens without a representation for the buyer, then look at what we're going to risk. And this is just where the education comes in. And the thing that I don't want any of you to lose, including Peter, who is a fantastic agent, one of the best agents in this company, is a love for other people and empathy for other people and just solving the problems for other people. Within this whole entire debacle that we're trying to clean up, how low does this go? Does taking Claire no more love? What does that mean, Peter?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, look, back to the scenario really quick. The scenario is, and I apologize, is it Becky?
Yeah,
sorry.
Becky, yep.
So look, sorry, my impression was you already signed a buyer broker agreement as far as that goes. But at the end of the day, you have a new listing that hasn't even hit the market. And if no one's willing to budge, my perception is you do take care of your client as far as that goes, especially if they're a past client as far as that goes. If you let money get in the way, you no longer have a client, in my opinion. But I was also just stating, I ran across an agent yesterday, a very good agent, by the way, in our industry, Ryan Kramer with Remax, who offered a 0% BBC. So I had a conversation with him about that yesterday on $1 million listing in Salt Lake County. And I thought it was crap. So.
Yeah.
And when we talk about no more love, don't kid yourself, Will. We're going to have all kind of shortcut agents out there trying to hammer it to us. And if you don't think that people are going to start to put together a list of certain companies that are cheating people, good agents out of what we earn and what we make. Don't kid yourself. I'm doing the same thing. I've got agents in mind that I'm like, yeah, you come to me and it's just not happening. So
Right.
that's
Peter,
right now.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question to Peter?
Sure, go ahead.
Fire away.
So Peter, what did the good agent who wasn't offering a commission say on the $1 million listing? What was,
So yesterday, the conversation was basically, hey, if you had a discussion with your clients in regards to offering a compensation package to a buyer, and he said yes. And I said, great, tell me what the compensation package is. And it was 2%. And I'm like, okay, perfect. So they've agreed to 2%. Well, I wasn't thinking fast enough on my feet because I cut the call, but I should have asked him why he's not posting that on the MLS right now, because on the MLS, he is showing a 0% BBC. And if that seller's in fact offering a 2% commission, why in the world would he not be disclosing it right now? We're not in the middle of July. The rules haven't changed yet as far as that goes. But his comment to me was, well, send me an offer and send me over escrow instructions or what you're going to want for a commission. Well, if I did that, it would be a 3% commission with an offer on it. So,
yeah.
Interesting.
By the way, and thanks you guys for your input. You make these huddles really, really good. Peter and Kim had their best year in their history last year in 2023, which we all agree was not actually the best economic conditions, but they had more sales and more GCI last year than any other year. So I congratulate them, and I would listen closely to what they have to say. I mean, they're in the trenches every day. They deal with it every day. And this is, I mean, it's just bringing to light how important, again, it is to have the discussions with buyers right away about what you're about to do, like what the job is. It's not just showing a home. And we've just been historically, we've frankly made the bed we're sleeping in some ways. I would argue that NAR probably was like a wet lab who'd been out in the swamp all day and came in and got in my bed. But in some ways, the saying, we make the bed we sleep in, but we've had a really bad pattern of just showing people houses until they find one they like, and then we buyer broker them to write the offer. And it's just, it skips over all the work that you're going to do. And because everything was already kind of baked in, we didn't have to explain it. And now we really, really have to explain it. Becky, I think if my advice to you to summarize all of this is I would ask the buyer if they're okay with you submitting a request for the full fee and explain what your job is, but you have to explain what your job is. You can't just be like, hey, I just want more money. So you have to get a running start at it. But at the end of the day, if we have to make a concession for a business decision, and it works for us as a company and for you as an agent, because as we all know, most of the commission is the agents anyway. So we have to work together at this. Then we will do what's right case by case. And so, we're the biggest, but we're not rigid. We have empathy, but we have to still run a business. It still has to work for all of us. And there are occasions, because not all transactions are the same, where we need to be flexible, including what we may agree to with a BAC. Okay. So that's kind of what I would say. And it's a perfect question. And thanks, Peter, Becky, for bringing that. And Julie, your questions too. The comments were really good. But it does, I think you guys should noodle on some things. Like, if this happened to you, what will you do? When your buyer is the same as Becky's situation, how are you going to handle this? And what do we wish we could do a little differently? And how can we manage this moving forward with everyone who wants services to help look at a home and things like that? I mean, how are you going to handle that when that's you? And hey, I'll throw this out. If any of you have any ideas on what you hope a new company, if there needs to be a change to the company policy, if you have any ideas on what you think that should be, please call me and let's discuss. We're in the process of formulating some sessions coming up next week. Mark is at Realty Alliance starting Sunday, where we hope to get a lot of guidance from other brokerages across the country on how they're handling some of these things. I mean, all the details, like, are we going to share BAC on our websites? You know, what could we do? What could we not do? Do we even want to share the BAC on our website? So yeah, you know, all this is being discussed, and we love your input. So stay tuned. It's a moving target, and we'll stay on top of it.
Hey, Will, I'm sorry I had to jump in late on the call. Can I have a question? And he probably already addressed.
You bet. Yep. Go ahead.
So nowadays we can't offer less than 3% as a BAC, right? For the buyer as a listing agent. Are we allowed to do that now?
No. No, the policy's unchanged. I mean, we believe that, and what I said, I started off the huddle with something that we do know. And Joe will go ahead and play that video in just a second. But the thing we do know is our advice will not change. Now that we know. Now the question might be if we determine that we might have a policy that would accept listings that are less than 3%. And I think this comes across as two different kinds of questions. Like, look at it like this. Do you want the company to deny a listing that you take where your seller will not offer something that other than a 3%? And I think the knee-jerk reaction is, look, this is 34 years of real estate, okay? All my life, I have been commission-based. I own my own company. I sold property. I get it. So my first reaction as an agent, I go, I don't want the company denying any of my listings I want to take, right? And then noodle on that for a minute. I go, wait a minute. The BAC is a big part of my ability to sell, right? It's a big part of the formula. So why don't you debate that and see what you think we should do there. In the commercial world, there is no BAC on any website. None. No, you know, CoStar does not put the compensation for any building that's for sale, any lease that's for sale. It's not there. So kind of keep that in mind. So yeah, as of now, policy is still 3% BAC. Okay, Joe, do you want to play that video of Jeff Bezos? I hope you guys can hear this, okay? Turn your volume up.
Very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is an interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that second question is actually the more important of the two. Because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. And so as you pointed out, in our retail business, we know that customers want low prices. And I know that's going to be true 10 years from now. They want fast delivery. They want vast selection. It's impossible to imagine a future 10 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish the prices were a little higher. I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Impossible. And so the effort that we put into those things, spinning those things up, we know the energy we put into it today will still be paying dividends for our customers 10 years from now. When you have something that you know is true, even over the long term, you can afford to put a lot of energy into it.
Perfect. Okay, so what is going to change is what everyone's saying. What's going to change? What's going to change? And we know that change is upon us, and we're trying to figure out how to cope with it. But what if we looked at it differently, like Jeff is suggesting? What's not going to change in the world of real estate? And if we get more specific and say, what's not going to change as far as the role and value of a buyer's agent? Again, what not going to change? Not what's going to, but what's not going to change. So what is that, do you think?
Complexity.
Okay, the complexity of the real estate transaction. We're not getting simpler, are we? We're getting more complex every year. So the complexities will still be there. They'll be there today, and they will be there tomorrow, and they'll be there in 10 years. Okay, so the complexity is not going away. Okay, Leslie's saying people always want to buy and sell homes. Yep, that's not going away. The legal risk. Yes, Christopher, the legal risk. Again, we have more legal, litigation and potential pitfalls than we've ever had, and more complexities. Someone suggested to me, if you had what we have today, as far as forms and the education we require, and you went back to 1990, that it's very possible that regulatory bodies like the state would require a lot more education to become a real estate agent. I mean, it's gotten to be crazy complicated, right? All right. So yeah, Sandy says complexities and risk not going away.
Well, I'll submit one here.
Yeah.
90% of consumers say that they value having a real estate agent in their transactions. So 90%, you think about the number for sell by owners out there is a very, very small fraction. The others highly value the knowledge and expertise of both a buyer's agent and a listing agent. That's not going to change. They may, change the compensation models, but that is a basic desire for every one of those people not to make a mistake with the largest investment they're going to make in their life, either the purchase or the sale of it. And they can either use a realtor who's trained in this or an attorney, but I'll tell you what, the attorney's going to cost them more.
That's right. Yeah, Kev, I don't know if you jumped in a little bit later, but we read the article that Steve sent.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so. Kevin's quoting that, guys, and that's what we reviewed. Is that statistically speaking, 9 out of 10 buyers use agents and benefit from that, and said that they would use them again. And so they're happy with the service they got from their buyer's agent.
Well, that's because they didn't pay for it.
Yeah, they still value it. So what is it worth? That's the question.
Well, they didn't pay for it, and it's different when you're going to ask them to pay for it. Will it still be 90%? I don't think so.
Yep. This is what we're going to track. We can keep. So let's go back to what's not changing. What do you think is not going to change? Not what's going to, but what's not going to change. I like Sandy's take on the wire fraud, the value of hiring an agent, protecting your money. There's more scams and more attempts to get at their equity and their earnest money and their wires and all of that. Absolutely very, very true. This is why I'm insistent that there's villains in the story. These villains have they don't care about people's money. They don't care about it at all. They have zero empathy at all if they take everyone's equity, all of it. Okay, there's no remorse. So they're very much like the villains we see in hero movies. Right? And the only way you win over the villain is you have a hero. Right? And that's you. You're the hero.
Something that's not going to change is people want something for nothing. I love that, Kimberly. But they all know you get what you pay for.
Yeah, that's good. People are going to still need guidance. That's right. It's not going to get easier. They did pay for it because it was in the list price. Yeah, I think I think that's how we have to teach it. We have to remind them that expenses that a seller agreed to were deducted from the sales price that you ultimately paid. The buyer paid it in the sales price. So frankly, again, that's not changed. We can put the fee for a buyer's agent inside the listing price, the sell price, like we always have. And that is a concept that is unchanged. People with negotiating experience dominate people who have less, no skills. Yeah, I think you could really, really lose in the whole negotiating process in contracts. That's a good point.
And one thing that I think we're going to see, Will, is that buyers are going to see that a seller is not offering compensation. And so they're going to assume that they're going to be able to make an offer 3% less. Where the seller is thinking that I'm going to save 3% by not offering 3%. So who's going to lose? The golden rule says that the golden rule, whoever has the gold makes the rules. The buyer's the one who has the money. They're going to get a lower price out of that seller eventually. And it's going to be kind of back to the way it is right now. And the fact that a seller is not going to want to discount their price. And they're going to try to, basically pad it with 3% by taking the buyer's side or supposing that they're going to get it, but they're not going to.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of a shell game, where you're just moving, you stick it under a shell and you move it around and, where's the money, right?
Yep.
What happens is that sellers have said, well, I've got an idea. Why don't I just not pay for these things and then I'll keep them?
Yeah.
Right. So they just moved it over to their side. And I think we have to enlighten buyers on that play. That this is it's a common kind of fallacy of how money operates in real estate, but it has to begin with the value of the agent and what your charges are, and that the seller are traditionally paying for these, and when they don't do that, they're just trying to move it off of their side and onto the buyer side. There's a little, I think there's a little discussion here about, okay, Tara, so what will the response be to a seller question? If the buyer's agent only asks for 2.5, do I get to keep the rest? I'm just looking through your comments there. Yeah, keep the half. Well, to Scott's point, remember the way the stipulations are today, and I think these might change, but we'll see. Whatever you put in the buyer broker agreement is the max you can receive. And it can't say whatever the seller's offering. Okay. It cannot say that. That's in the stipulation. So you can't say, I'll take whatever the seller's offering. You have to put a number in there. And this is after July, guys, not today, but after July. And if the stipulation goes unchanged. So just remember that. So we're kind of looking in the future here to answer this, but because that question was answered on future rules instead of current rules. Because right now the buyer broker agreement says that the offer from the listing company through the MLS will satisfy buyer's obligation. So although that will probably have similar language in the future, we have to be careful about how that's worded. Otherwise, we'll be in violation of the stipulations. The buyer ultimately has to, and this is what Ramon's point is, buyers are going to have to be faced with, like, look, the fee that you put here, you're paying that either in the sales price or in another means. You're paying it. And we're being very, very blunt about that. I did have two attorneys, though, yesterday tell me that they thought they could have argued that Utah, that those cases would have never settled in Utah because the buyer broker agreement, even its old version, still had a really strong case that the buyer's paying the fee. But just anyway, color on legal posturing. And the state in which they chose to settle is not, that was not a dart on a, just throw a dart and see where it hits. No, that was very, very calculated what state they chose. So it wouldn't have happened in Utah. Sandy said, I would only think no, because they signed the listing agreement at 6. So I think the question here, and Kev, why don't you and I ask this together, but if a buyer, if we put a 3% BAC out there and an agent is only asking for 2.5, what do we do with the other half a point?
Well, the agent can only receive what's on their buyer's agent agreement. And so that would go back to our client, I would guess. Although our commission is for the full 6%, so it could in reality come to the listing brokerage because the seller agreed to pay 6% to the listing brokerage. They're just not paying as much to the buyer's agent. So final answer, it'd go back to the listing brokerage and to the agent.
I mean, we could certainly modify it if we had to. We could, modify that.
Fund.
Yeah. What we have, yeah. I mean, what we don't have is we don't have listing agreements and buyer broker agreements that are dealing with these new stipulations, and these flexible BACs are all over the place. Yeah. We don't have that. Yeah, definitely a party fund would be awesome.
Raven asked, what will Berkshire Hathaway's policy for unrepresented buyer be, as those will likely explode? We agree that probably will happen. The division is always caution us against intentionally creating dual agency. Whenever possible, if we're representing a seller and a buyer comes directly to us, we shouldn't offer to represent them. We should let them know that in helping the seller get the property sold, we could help them as an unrepresented buyer, or they could go find representation on their own. Always give them that choice. But we don't automatically jump to try to sign a buyer's agency with them. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We could simply say, I'd be happy to help you fill out the contract, present it to my seller with the full understanding I represent the seller. I don't represent you, and we have the unrepresented buyer addendum signed and disclosure, but they're free to then, have you present the offer, but you're under no obligation to discount the price just for this buyer who wants to be paid the buyer's agent commission. They're not licensed and they're not entitled to it.
So, Kevin, on that has been one of my biggest concerns. If we get an unrepresented buyer and we fill out a contract for them, we are now walking like a duck, quacking like a duck, and now we are representing them with no representation signed.
Now
I think
that's called implied agency. When they think that we're representing them, that's why we are going to, I'm sure, be having Mark strengthen our unrepresented buyer disclosure and addendum, where they already sign, they understand that you do not represent them, no way, shape, or form. But if you basically are filling out the contract at their direction and you're presenting it to the seller and they know that you represent them, the confirmation of agency is right in the REPC that they are unrepresented and that you represent the seller. It's made clear to them, but you have to be careful with this implied agency when they ask you, what do you think the seller will accept? I don't know. Let's write it. Let's write the offer and I'll present it and we'll find out together. Never compromise that seller's position in helping the buyer put together an unrepresented offer.
I think it's going to be almost impossible to fill out a contract with an unrepresented buyer and not explain the contract to that buyer and all the stipulations. And I worry that if we come in saying that we can help them, I personally would rather see a dual agency, maybe a single party listing where you're just representing that buyer on that listing. I don't know. I worry about filling out a contract for somebody that I do not have an exclusive buyer broker. I worry how that's going to affect us legally. I've just had a couple of lawsuits in the last 10 years that I've gone through. So I've learned a lot about legality.
Will may be able to chime in on this too, but bottom line is if we sign a buyer's agency with them, we enter a limited agency, we actually create more liability for ourselves in the company than if they're completely unrepresented. And we recommended that they go find their own representation or have an attorney write it for them. And then if they choose against our advice to have you write it, we've clearly defined our boundaries that we are not representing them.
Yeah, look, I think your instincts, Becky, are spot on. The whole industry is talking about this. This is why the consequences of the stipulations were not argued in court. Remember, the evidence was not allowed. It was only to decouple commissions because sellers set the rate for the buyer and the buyer didn't negotiate the rate. Okay, there was no evidence supported about what it did to veterans, what it's going to do to unrepresented buyers, the increase of litigation, these agents who are going to be helping customers and just filling out agreements. And they may explain it, they may not explain it. If the buyer blows up and gets in litigation because he didn't know, they didn't talk about any of that.
No.
So our position is going to have to be, we have to be a lot louder, a lot more clear, a lot more repetitive on what you give up if you don't sign that buyer broker agreement. And I posed this last week. I hope you guys were noodling on this. But if you fall into a transaction with a customer buyer, you're the listing agent, you represent the seller, and they came to you, because that's what we're projecting. They came to you without an agent. They're not going to pay for one, right? So they just came to you and negotiated. What are you going to do the night before the financing and appraisal deadline? Are you going to call them and ask them if everything is okay to protect their $10,000 earnest money? How about their $100,000 earnest money? Their $500,000 earnest money? You represent the seller. Are you going to call them and say, are you guys okay? Are you good? Remember when I said that we're going to have this earnest money could be non-refundable? We're not going to call them. And so then what's going to happen is you'll call them at 5:05 tomorrow is what you're going to do. Right? after it's non-refundable. Then you're going to call them and say, hey, I just want to make sure everything's good to go. I haven't heard from your lender yet. Everything okay? Right? And then they're going to say, gosh, I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known. And this is the problem we're seeing. So imagine a disclosure that has all of these transactional issues lined out where they have to initial. I understand that when it comes to contract deadlines where my earnest money could become non-refundable, that the listing agent is not responsible to inform me. Initial.
Right.
Right? And all of the issues when it comes to due diligence items that we discovered in our inspection, the listing agent's responsibility is to not negotiate with the seller for the repairs. You understand that initial, see? So I think, and this is coming, and we're not waiting for the UAR. Okay? We have our own. We can do it. And if they come up with something, awesome. But we did get Mark on the forms committee, so maybe he'll drag them along. But if you can imagine this form and how much value it will give to the represented buyer. Like, you really need these services. You don't want to forego this. It's a disaster without it. Right? So we got this. We got this. We got this. All right. I know our time is up. I'm going to end on a dad joke. If you already saw this, I apologize. But for those who didn't, my grandson gave me brownie. Well, what I thought was brownies. He says, Grandpa, I want you to open this brownies. So I opened it up and I'm like, are they chocolate? And he was waiting, giggling, you know, and I opened it up and I found brown ease. Brown ease. And he thought that was the funniest thing ever. Anyway, sure love you guys. Thanks for attending Huddle. Thanks for all your